Hello, in this presentation, on a sample part, using a macro for taking a screen snapshot, I will show you different ways to call and protect macros. Starting with the sample part, I will open from Tools menu, the macro window. First, I will select and run the screen capture.catbs macro. An input box appears, asking for a screenshot name, meanwhile the background turns white. After the name is written, and the OK button is pressed, a message box appears, asking to push OK button to return to previous background color. A new message box, informing that the screenshot was taken and saved as bitmap file on desktop, appears. The snapshot content is the active window, as shown. Next, I will show you the code behind this macro. From Tools menu select Macro, or Alt plus F8 combination. I select the macro and push Edit button to view the code. As you can see, the code is editable and unprotected in this case. If you need, you can change the path where the snapshot are saved, or the text of input box and message box. The same macro code can be written into cat script file. But, if I select an existing cat script as shown, you can see that the obfuscate button is not available for this kind of extension. Returning to VBS script file, and select obfuscate button, I'm asked to enter a new name for this version. The obfuscated file appears now in the list. In the edit window, the code is now obfuscated, unreadable and unbreakable, but still working. I'm adding information about this macro in a header, stored in a text file, and paste it before the obfuscated code. This is useful, because in name change eventuality, opening the code will say nothing about what is doing. Running the obfuscated code works the same as the unprotected, with same speed. Personally, I consider this the best way to encode a macro, because so far as I know, there is no method to unobfuscate the file. Next, from macros window, I will use a cat script file to call a cat VBA file. Both files are contained in the same folder, as you can see. By pressing Run button, an example user interface is opened, and from here we can call and run the previous obfuscated macro by pushing a button. The macro works as usual, but this time can be selected from an VBA interface. Next, I will show you the code behind this cat script. Here are defined the cat VBA file name and path, also the module to open. The same interface can be accessed by selecting the cat VBA file and the test module. The code behind test module calls a form, created in Visual Basic Editor. The test form can be as complex as we need, by adding different controls from toolbox. Each controls added can contain a macro inside this CATVBA project, or can call a macro from another file. To view the code behind the button, right-click and select View Code. The code calls the previous obfuscated file, and runs it at button click, and also hides the graphic form. The VBA project can be locked for viewing with a password, but this method is breakable, by someone who know how to use a hex-diter software. This is the reason why I prefer obfuscated files, called from an interface, with no other code embedded into the VBA project. After saving the project, I close it and reopen, to see the password effect. The project is not accessible until the right password is entered, but it still works as expected. Next, I want to add a button in an existing toolbar, assigning to it the cat script calling the VBA interface. From Commands tab, I select Macros and in the right window, the call VBA interface.cat script file. Pushing Show Properties button, Next Icons button, opens a window from where I assign an icon to this macro, as shown. Next, I drag the selected macro to the desired toolbar and close the Customize window. Pushing the newly added button will call the VBA macro interface. And from here, using the obfuscated file to take the snapshot. So, I hope you will find interesting the different ways to call one macro from another, to obfuscate macros and password protect VBA project. Also to give you an idea about the way you can increase the productivity using macros and calling them from a VBA interface.